Today we're going to talk about Chapter 4 in the Power of Critical Thinking, and this is Reasons for Belief and Doubt. And I want to just kind of do our first little bit here, and then I'll explain other things as we go along. Chapter 4 is all about when and how well to accept certain claims. And we're not going to talk about specific arguments, but we're going to talk more about how to tell if something is not right, when we should disbelieve, when we should believe, and when we should proportion our belief to the evidence. And so we've got some things about claims conflicting. We've all had that experience where we think we know something, and then we're confronted with the truth of the matter, and it's not what we normally would believe. And the opposite of that is true as well. Sometimes we're confronted with things that we go, no, that's not possible. And we have to be careful what we decide to believe and what we decide not to believe. So we're going to get some help with that. Another thing that is a big deal is, when is an expert actually an expert? So we're going to talk about a lot of different things that go into someone being an expert. And when somebody is an expert, or when a particular publication is considered expert advice or expert evidence, then we have to know how to evaluate that. And we also have to be able to look at whether or not this is a true expert or somebody just playing one. Okay. And then the last piece of this chapter is personal experience. Lots and lots of people, myself included, tend to use their own experience as not exactly proof, but as, here's an example of how this works. And how well can we do that? How often can we do that? What should we watch out for in our own experience when we shouldn't trust ourselves to remember correctly? And that's a whole different thing at the end here. In Chapter 4, for your homework stuff, you're going to have the normal reading log, exercises, and then at the end of the chapter, there's some integrated exercises that keep us kind of on our toes or up to speed with things we've already learned. And I always find that a little bit of repetition is a good thing. A lot of repetition is just busy work. But this is helpful, I think, in kind of keeping your mind in, okay, this is what we're really looking at. I think the questions there will be really helpful. Okay, so Chapter 4, we have all kinds of, and we're on page 115 through 137 this time, so in the 7th edition. So we, as critical thinkers, care about what we believe and why we believe it, because our beliefs and our assumptions tend to inform our choices and actions, and that's where really we end up with some trouble. And I have one of the quotes that I use for our discussion boards is a Jane Austen quote. It's also a Batman quote, kind of, sort of. It's also, a whole bunch of other people have said this, but it's not really what we think or what we say so much that defines us as what we actually do. And, everybody always, you have people that talk a good game. But when it comes right down to it, they can't do it, or they won't do it. Politicians are master players at this game, right? Say everything you think you want, that we want you to say everything you think we want to hear, so that we'll vote for you. And then when you get in office, you do what you want. Happens all the time on both sides, parties-wise here. So we're looking at when we come across a claim, and it can be something tiny, it can be something world-shattering, earth-shattering for us anyway, and everything in between. But when we come across a claim that we go, what? We have to evaluate. Okay, were we wrong in our initial assumption, or is this claim wrong? Okay, and Dr. Vaughn is great about giving us multiple examples and ways to look at things, and you have to read the book. So, our first section here, though, when claims conflict. I want to tell you a couple of things about how this chapter kind of lays out. We have one big word, okay? And I chose this one as a big word because it plays on us all the time, And it's a little bit different from what we would think about background information being, okay? In logic, in argument, background information is that huge collection of very well supported beliefs that we all rely on to inform our actions and choices. And it's that we all part. You probably either bemoan this yourself or have heard the saying that, common sense isn't so common anymore. Common sense and common knowledge are two terms that are very closely related. They're not exactly the same, but they're very closely related. Common sense is something you should be able to figure out just by being a human being living in the world. Okay? Don't litter. Don't mess up. Clean up after yourself, that kind of stuff. That's a common sense thing. Common knowledge is stuff that we know, specifics that we know about specific things, like a thermos keeps your coffee hot. Okay, you don't take a big gulp out of a thermos when you first open it until you test and see if it's hot. That's a common knowledge thing. How big are televisions? Well, these days depends upon where you live, what you do. 5 feet used to be impossible, and now it's everywhere, right? A 60-inch television, that's kind of out there. But different things that are common knowledge now weren't common knowledge 10, 20 years ago, okay? Think about the advent of smartphone technology, okay? Now, cell phones, okay, transmitted a signal, okay? You basically have that kind of electronic communication. But a smartphone is also a little computer, right? It's a microcomputer. And it does things that, people who were born mid-century, last century, are totally impressed by. Every time I open my phone up and do something, I'm amazed at how fast it goes, where it can take me, what it can do. And they're wonderful, but they're also time sinks and a lot of other things as well. So thinking about what we think of as common shifts generation to generation. And we have to be careful that we're not expecting too much from folks who don't have the same reality that we do. Okay, this is kind of a cultural, societal understanding of the way the world works. Okay, now, are there gradations of this? Yes, of course. Okay, what I know as the world works, growing up in a working class family in a very economically depressed area of the country, is very different from somebody who grew up upper class on the West Coast, that kind of stuff. So it makes a difference in our background information. This chapter, not because it doesn't have a lot of keywords, but it has a lot of crucial ideas, what I'm calling crucial sentences. And these are already kind of set apart in the book as important. And the first one is here at the bottom of page 116. It says, if a claim conflicts with other claims we have good reason to accept, we have good grounds for doubting it. Just because somebody says something doesn't necessarily mean it's true. We all know that, right? And when we get things, we get incoming information that conflicts with what we already know about a situation, we have to look at and see which side got it right, okay? Or to what degree which side got it right. There's a fun box on page 117 about favorite unsupported claims, and these evidently are Dr. Vaughn's favorite things. Become invisible. It's strange about the weather is, controlled by the government, that kind of stuff. So it's kind of interesting. Background information, that particular discussion is on bottom of page 118. It's also just like that in your glossary. There's an extra couple of sentences added on to that. This is the one that you have to have running around your head all the time. And for the test, if you add the other sentence, though I may give you a couple points of extra credit. So, when conflict, okay, make sure I'm on the right spot. There's a little box, one of those further thought boxes on page 119, fact and opinion. We are not exactly lazy, but we are lazy users of our language. And so we have one word that means lots of things. And then when we're talking about logic, it's a little further refined. So you have to be careful when you say something is a fact. A fact is a state of affairs. Okay, this is how things are, right? And also, we do things, we say things like, fact is true, okay? It's true that the cat knocked the lamp over, okay? Now, you can have an opinion about whose fault it was that the cat knocked the lamp over, but the fact is the cat did it, okay? Some opinions are also true, so they can be facts in and of themselves. It's my opinion that the cat knocked the lamp over. Well, it's my opinion, but it's also true because I saw it happen. Okay. We have to think about how we use our words, especially when we're talking about an argument or we're talking about claims that we're going to believe. Okay. And I wanted to make sure that you all remember that a claim is a statement. A statement can also be called a premise, a conclusion, or a belief. Sometimes they're also called assumptions. All of those things are claims, but they're mostly, well, they're always statements. Okay, so there's something that can be true or false. It's interesting sometimes where we land in that continuum of truth and falsity. So at the bottom of 119, we have another crucial sentence. If a claim conflicts with our background information, we have good reason to doubt it. Okay, and they give some examples here about, this baby can bench press 500 pounds. Well, last time I checked, babies can barely hold their heads up. So bench pressing 500 pounds, pretty impossible. A lot of other things that we have to think about and keep, again, running around the back of our head is this idea of proportioning our belief to the evidence. Remember, we learned in the past unit that evidence is something that makes a statement more likely to be true. Okay, and so we have to think about how good is this evidence? How much does it agree with what we already know, background information? And can we in any way prove or support its being true or false? Okay. And we have all these wonderful things here on page 120. Sometimes we have to revise our background information. I think I talked about this already. There's a thing in here in one of the previous chapters about do humans really only use 10% of their brains? Well, I had heard that over and over again growing up. It's just kind of a known thing. Well, that's not true. We use anywhere from 85 to 95% of our brains all the time to do simple tasks like walking across the floor, which isn't so simple, but to us it is. We learned when we were really little. We don't remember, most of us don't remember learning how to walk. We just know we can't. And there are lots of other things that we have to think about there, but the idea of having something in your background information, like the 10% of our brains thing, and then finding out through scientific research that that's not true. So I have to kind of purge that out of there and go, okay, we use most of our brains most of the time, okay, which makes total sense, really. I mean, why have 90% of that stuff hanging out up there if we don't ever use it? We're just not that redundant in our systems, So we should proportion our beliefs to the evidence. That's another crucial sentence, okay? And it's not reasonable to believe a claim when there is no good reason for doing so. Why do you believe X? It's just because. It's what I've always thought. My parents taught it to me, okay? And your parents are not bad guys, okay? We learn new stuff every generation all the time, and our understanding of the world and technology and all of that is like going off the charts. So don't hold it against them. But there are things that I knew growing up that aren't relative anymore, okay? There are things that I didn't know growing up that embarrass me now that I do know them, because it seems like, oh, I should have known that. That was silly. Sometimes we have to revise our background information, but we always have to examine what we believe. Socrates, right? The unexamined life is not worth living. And he's right. We have to figure out what we believe so that we know and we can trust our own actions and choices. Okay. So, experts versus non-experts. Okay, they say and, but they're really diametrically opposed here most of the time. So, this is one of my pet peeves. I find it absolutely horrendous that many folks believe that if they do a Google search and read a couple of articles that they are an expert. No, you might be conversant in some information there, but you're not an expert. You're not. Being an expert takes years of study, of experience, of learning how to make good judgments in that particular field. It's not an overnight thing, regardless of who you talk to. And we have this, especially here in the United States, we have this kind of anti-intellectual leaning, which is really sad, and not just because I count myself in those intellectual people. It's really sad because there are a lot of people who have spent years of their lives working on how to explain certain things, or how to make certain things, or what happens when we do this, or should we do this. And it seems so petty for other people to think that, oh, well, I know, this thing about rockets going to the moon kind of thing, because, I watched Apollo 13 and I've read a couple of NASA reports. Okay, maybe you know more than your friends do, but you don't know more than the experts. Okay, sorry to burst your bubble. So an expert is someone who is more knowledgeable in a particular subject area or field than most others are. Okay? When they're confronted with information, with claims in that field, they are more likely than any of the rest of us to be correct in whether to accept or deny that particular claim. Okay? Not just because they're experts or whatever, they have a degree, but because they have mastered particular skills or bodies of knowledge. Again, years of study, years of practice. And they practice those skills or use that knowledge as their main occupation in life. Okay? I am not a medical professional. Okay? I happen to have a few chronic illnesses that have made me research deep and wide on what's the best way to go about this, because most of my doctors have not gone deep and wide on my particular conditions. And so sometimes I have to kind of lead them along. Does that mean I'm a better doctor than they are? Oh, no. I just know me really well. Okay. An expert is somebody who are familiar with the established facts and existing data in their field, understand how to properly evaluate that information, and know how to apply it. Okay. Now, I can tell my doc, yes, here's this blood test that I need because it measures the level of inflammation, and that's a big deal for me. And I know if that number is higher than it was the last time, that I've got more active disease and I need to take better care of myself. That's kind of a normal, ongoing thing. But when a claim runs counter to a consensus among the experts, this principle holds. Okay, if a claim conflicts with expert opinion, we have good reason to doubt it. Now, there will always be folks who claim to be experts, and perhaps they have the credentials even, but they've gone off on a tangent that nobody else in their field supports. Okay, now sometimes those guys end up being right, okay, but not often enough to totally buy into what they're doing. Okay, so if claims conflict, if I think something is true, okay, I've read a few articles, but my doctor says, no, actually, those articles have been superseded by this other study because, okay, then I need to go with what my expert says. A big one in that particular vein, and some of you are going to go off the deep end with this one, but that vaccines can cause autism. There was one very flawed study that was done back in the 80s that said this was a link. And the physician, he did have a MD, the physician who explained this falsified his data and never basically took it back, kind of thing. People still trot this out, and this is why this is why they don't get their kids vaccinated, and that kind of thing. And there's a lot of flawed thinking in that, but we have to be careful to make sure if we're going to base our choices for ourselves, for our kids, on a particular bit of information, we have to make sure that bit is really right. And not just because, oh, I read it, well, yeah, okay, what about it? Okay, so we have to be careful. There's another principle. When the experts, the body of experts disagree on a particular claim, we need to suspend our judgment. We need to doubt it for now, okay? And we have to be careful, like I said, like the autism and vaccines thing. You have to look at whether it really is the body of experts who disagree. Like, we haven't done enough research on this. We can't really say one way or the other. Or these guys are right because they've got this body of knowledge, and these guys are right because they have this body of knowledge, but they're not the same. We have to figure out, we don't, they do. The experts have to figure out, okay, where's the real answer? And sometimes it takes a while. Doesn't mean that they're wrong. It doesn't mean that they're awful. Doesn't mean that they're hokey. It just means that we don't know yet, okay? And I think that applies very much so to our roller coaster ride with COVID. It's not that the experts were wrong about any of this. It's that they made the best plans, the best claims with what they knew. All the time in science, all the time in every field you're in, we make progress, right? And sometimes we make progress, we kind of re-solidify our previous ideas. And sometimes we have to go, oh, okay, so this part was right, this part was wrong, and now we know, okay? So it changes, okay? And it will always change that way. We just have to pay attention. Sometimes we have what is a fallacious appeal to authority. Okay, it's a fallacy because it's intrinsically wrong to call this person an expert, or it's intrinsically wrong to call this idea settled enough to be a claim. Okay, so first, just because someone is an expert in one field, he or she is not necessarily an expert in any other field. There is no such thing as a general expert, okay? Imagine, I don't know if you guys have enough of this. If you've ever seen a set of encyclopedias, okay? My parents had one, and it was A through Z and a couple of extra pieces and all that. It took the whole shelf on the bookshelf. And that was supposed to be kind of a summary of the sum of human knowledge. And I always thought even when I was a little kid, wow, we don't know very much, do we? You look at things like the Oxford English Dictionary, just a dictionary, but it is, I think it's up to 22 volumes. They're all, giant books, those like giant dictionaries all by themselves. We have a lot of knowledge. We have to think about what pieces apply to this and how we can use them. And sometimes the only way to do that is to ask the experts. The second way we can fall into a fallacy of appeal is regarding a non-expert as an expert. This is really hard, okay? Sometimes it's very obvious, okay? We have the stereotypical used car salesman kind of persona. We can spot them a mile away, okay? They don't really have our best interests. They're not trying to make any decent claims. They're just trying to get us to buy something. We're going to talk about that in chapter 5 too. But a lot of times these folks, these fallacious authorities, are very confident in what they say, and they make good sense, and then we figure out that they don't have any background, any training, any schooling, any oversight in that particular area. And, there are lots of different kinds of doctors, right? Not every doctor is a medical doctor, okay? Most of your instructors at university are doctors in their field, okay? And so you have to think about what field are we in. But the other thing about non-experts, and we get this all the time, especially in ads, it's a spokesperson, okay? So we recognize this person's face because they're in the movies or on television, or they're a famous athlete, or they're in the music industry, that kind of thing. And so they say something, and because we already think we know them, we believe them. And sometimes they're okay, and other times they're way off the mark. So how do we establish that somebody's an expert? Okay, there are 4 things, and these are on page 124. First is they have education and training from reputable institutions or programs. They usually have a degree of some sort or a certification, okay? They also have experience in the field. And sometimes one of these can take over for the other one. Say I'm looking for advice on what to do with my baby's diaper rash. Who am I going to ask? Either a mama I know has a lot more experience, or a grandma, right? I'm going to ask somebody who's been down this road before and get an answer that I trust, okay? Because they have experience in their field, okay? Not necessarily that they have a degree in, diaper rash kind of thing. There are also folks that they have a good degree, they've been in the field for years, and they're still clueless, okay? We all know folks like that, right? So you also want to look at their reputation among their peers, other folks with the same kind of degrees that they have, okay? Do we like Dr. Aztec? Yes, we do, because here and here and here and here, okay? And you can see that with publications, with accomplishments, with awards. All of those things go hand in hand with somebody doing a good job in their field, regardless of what that field is, okay? Now, there are problems, and some of them are pretty obvious. People who don't know what they're talking about pretty much show that up pretty early on. There are folks who talk a good game, Okay, that's the people we have to worry about because they seem confident and they seem expert. They know the lingo and they can use it well, but we have to be a little bit better. Okay, so if your source is not somebody or not from a peer-reviewed journal or a very reputable um, source, then you have to look things up. You have to do a little bit of work. And I know we like to be lazy and we like to just take things at face value, but that's not what critical thinking does. So if you go look this person up and it turns out that they are being paid by special interest groups, okay, somebody who is touting the safety of a particular drug. Okay, I do a lot of medical analogies in my head because this is where I live outside of class. They say, oh, this is going to suppress the symptoms of your chronic illness, and it's going to make you feel so much better. Your pain levels are going to go down, your energy levels are going to go up, and it's just an hour a month with an IV. Okay, sounds good to me. And then you find out that they work for that company. Like they're getting paid kickbacks to basically sell this particular medication. Happens more often than you think, unfortunately. Or they express such a high belief in a claim that any question you have is immediately shot down in derision. You don't know what you're talking about. That's not even a question. Okay. Or if the expert stands to gain financially, basically they're on the payroll somewhere. If I get 10 people to do this, I get $100 a piece. Okay, I like $1,000. There are, of course, other possible reasons to doubt the opinion of an expert. And here's the dubious authority list, is at the top of page 125. So the expert is guilty of simple factual or formal errors. They don't treat opposing views fairly. They cherry pick their data, and most other experts in the same field disagree. There are a few others on there, but that's the big deal. Okay. Now, there are all kinds of weird pieces out there. Like I said, America has a very strong line of anti-intellectualism. And part of that is, prior to mid-century last, the folks who got to go to college were all landed aristocrats, basically, right? If your family could afford it, and only if your family could afford it. Most of us would not be in college were it not for the shift that happened after World War II with the influx of all the veterans and what is known as the GI Bill. Basically, if you served your country, they would pay for training, whether that training was tech training, like we get at community college, or if that training was a bachelor's degree, master's degree, that kind of thing. And so lots and lots of folks go to college. And nowadays, it's almost, imperative that you have some sort of degree in order to keep your job or get a job or whatever. Okay, so, but this idea of anti-intellectualism, this non-expert preference, runs pretty deep in our country, and it's frustrating in some ways and liberating in others. So it depends upon what you're really looking at. Okay. Sometimes somebody who has years and years of experience is to be preferred over somebody who just got their degree. Makes kind of sense, right? There's also a nice little piece here on fallacious appeal to questionable authority. There's a newsmakers here on page 127. I think you'll enjoy those. Always make sure you check claims against at least one other source. That way, replication is a good thing. Okay. But remember, there are certain areas that we don't want experts to make all the decisions for us. Okay. And these are moral, social, or political questions. We can use their data. We can use their expert opinion, but really we individually and we as a society need to make those kinds of decisions for ourselves, okay, and own them as our own. Even experts can be wrong, and there's a list of fun ones here on page 126 where the experts in the field thought X, how many years ago, and they were wrong. Like the iPhone will be a market failure. The internet will be a spectacular flop. No use to get in on that, right? Anyway, interesting stuff. There's a really good book, and I'm about halfway through it now. Tom Nichols writes in The Death of Expertise that predictive failure, however, does not retroactively strip experts of their claim to know more than laypeople. Laypeople, that's not us non-experts, should not jump to the assumption that a missed call by the experts therefore means that they're all wrong, and everything they've ever said is wrong. No, individual pieces, right? If you're wrong once in your life, you're always wrong. Do you want under that onus? I don't, okay? Because I've been wrong on lots of things. Okay. There's some other fun things. And there's a review notes box on page 128 with all of our crucial sentences. Ooh, is that up there? Page 128. Has a list, okay? So you don't have to search for them all throughout. The last little piece here is personal experience. Most of the time, we can accept as a claim, as a belief, things that we have seen or participated in, okay? And the crucial sentence there is, it's reasonable to accept the evidence provided by personal experience only if there's no good reason to doubt it. Most of the time, we're good. Sometimes, though, we get our own little mess going on. And personal experience is one of those things where we have to remember a few things, okay? First and foremost, our memory is not an exact copy of what actually happened, okay? Listen to that. Our memory is not an exact copy of what actually happened, okay? Lots of things go into a memory, and it being what it is. I don't know if you're a Harry Potter fan, but in that, I think it's Half-Blood Prince, where they're trying to get the information from Slughorn about basically what Voldemort was doing, right? The Horcruxes. And he gives them the memory, but he's doctored it. In his own mind, he doesn't remember exactly what they were talking about when Tom Riddle asked him about what's a Horcrux, and can we do that kind of thing. And they can't figure out what this is because Slughorn's memory has been altered by his own brain, right? Our memories are constructive, okay? So we remember things, and if it was something that happened yesterday, pretty clearly, can go from point A to point B most of the time. But think about your memory of your first day of kindergarten. Okay, first got. You remember that not as the age you are now, with your faculties and all of that, but as you were at 5 or 6. And we know a lot more now than we did when we were 5 or 6. And so we have to be careful about how much belief, how much credence we give to memories we have as a young child. Not to say that they're wrong, but they're filtered through the consciousness of a small child. There's a difference there, okay? Other pieces in this, time. I've just been rattling on. Okay. There we go. So, we need to doubt our personal experience when we see or are presented with evidence of impairment. Okay? If we are ill, injured, tired, stressed, excited, drunk, drugged, distracted, or disoriented. Okay? Our memories of certain things can be skewed, right? When you're super tired or you're suffering from sleep deprivation, 2 or 3 nights in a row, can't get much sleep. And sometimes that's by design, sometimes that's just how your brain works. I call it my hamster wheel. But when we have that super tired, overstimulated kind of day, and then we have to remember something that happened, or God forbid, we're so distracted that we're in an accident or something like that. It's really hard for us to remember exact details. Okay, if you've ever been altered, okay, had a drink or 2 or 10, had some other fun things to do, or have been a drug user, there are lots of things during that period that you should not hold on to too tightly, okay, or use as evidence for who you are as a person or what happened in your life or whatever, because it's not always exactly true. Now, our memories can be fooled when we have specific expectations. If we're told that, oh, well, it's going to storm today, okay, we're in the category 3, we've really got to be worried about, watch out for tornadoes and things like that. Our expectation is every time we hear a rumble, oh, there it comes. Might just be a big truck, okay? But we expect there to be thunder and lightning and that kind of stuff, and so that's what we hear. One of the sad parts of this is that most eyewitness testimony of crimes, of whatever, aren't always accurate. We're easily swayed by circumstances, by suggestion, by expectations, and there's a Newsmakers box on page 132 that talks about Brandon Garrett, law professor at UVA, who has done all this work on how do we get it wrong? How do we put innocent people behind bars? And it's a very scary thing. It's why more than a few states have had a moratorium on the death penalty, is because we don't always get it right. In fact, there have been, let's see. Well, anyway, Garrett looked at over 200 cases in which innocent people served an average of 12 years in prison. In each case, the evidence used to convict them was at least flawed and often false. Yet, here we are, okay? Erroneous identification of the criminal by eyewitnesses occurred more than 79% of the time. 79%. Okay, that's a C+. That's way up there, especially when you're talking about these are folks who were wrongly convicted based on somebody else's identification of them as being the culprit. Yikes. Okay. And they have Jerry Miller on there as well. He served 25 years in prison. In 2007, he became the 200th prisoner in the United States to be exonerated by DNA evidence. 25 years. Yikes. Can never repay that. Okay, I think it's the last little piece here. Innumeracy and probability. When we have to do the math, most of us are a little intimidated, and we're likely to overestimate or underestimate the likelihood of something actually happening. Thinking about a friend that you haven't heard from in a long while, and they send you an IM, okay? Or you're in a room of people, and come to find out somebody else has the same birthday as you. Not date, right? But like, my birthday's May 1st. I know of at least 6 people that I've met in my life who is my birthday twin. Okay, they have the same date as me. They don't have the same year. Well, I don't think they ever have the same year. My 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Reese, had my birthday, and pastor and some friends kids, and anyway, birthday twin. How many people do you think it takes to guarantee that at least 2 of the people in the room will have the same birthday? 365, right? 1 in 365? Actually, only about 23. Every class I've ever had, it's so funny, every class I've ever had that had at least 25 people in it, there was at least 1 set of birthday twins in. Every class I've ever had. Because I asked, because I thought this was a very funny little ta-da, okay? We often misjudge coincidence, and we often have this error called the gambler's fallacy. That is believing that the previous incarnations of this particular coincidence can impact the next one, okay? I'm flipping a coin, heads and tails, okay? 50-50 shot every time. But I flipped 7 heads in a row. What's the chance that the next one is going to be heads? 50-50. Okay. It's what gets people in gambling debt. Okay. They believe that what has happened before has any impingement on what's going to happen next. Nope. It's all chance. Okay. But it's a particular chance. And that's where the math part here comes in too. So there's all kinds of math in here, but if you have a deck of cards and you want to know the probability of you pulling the first time the ace of spades, what's your chances? Well, there are 52 cards in the deck, so you have a 1 in 52 chance. Not very good odds. Now, if you say, what's the chance that I'm going to pull any spade? Okay, well, that's 1 in 4. There are 4 suits, okay? And really, you can go it this way. There's 13 cards in the suit, 52 cards in the deck. So 13 chances out of 52, which is basically 1/4. Okay, 1 in 4. And they do some other stuff in there and explain to you that if you're trying to do things in a row, if you're trying to pull things out, you have to kind of adjust your odds that way. But it's still a calculatable chance. You roll a dice. You roll a die, sorry. A 6-sided die, for those of you on campaigns and such. A 6-sided die. My chances of rolling a 3 are 1 in 6. My chances of rolling a 3, again, is also 1 in 6. My chances of rolling 2 3s in a row, said like that, is 1 in 9. Sorry, yes, 1 in 9. You have to multiply them. So, it's all kinds of fun. Okay, so personal experience is there in a little box. And then we have this further thought, I just know. Some people think that they have a good gut and can figure things out. Okay. My particular intuition is more about people and their intent. Okay. Everybody gives off vibes, right? I'm just really sensitive to them. That's a whole different deal. This particular box is rather scary for those of us who lived through it. It makes total sense. So you have to read that, the I Just Know, on page 135 and 136. It's just amazing. Okay, so chapter 4 exercises start on page 137. You have a list on Blackboard that tells you what you're supposed to do. Also, the integrated exercises as well. There's a second piece for that. Your reading log should be at least a page of some sort of way of getting at all this stuff. Just so you know, okay, I take notes on the chapter on my own. I have 7 pages for chapter 4. It's not the biggest chapter either. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it helps. If you have questions, email me. You know the drill. So have a good day.